I took the job because I needed money. It was a night shift security job at a warehouse full of mannequins. Sounded easy. Walk around, check things, and stay awake until morning. The guy who hired me, Mr. Langley, looked really tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He explained what I had to do. There are cameras, but they don't work well, he said, rubbing his forehead. You'll need to check everything yourself, and he paused like he wasn't sure if he should say the next part. Just watch the mannequins. If anything seems different, write it down. I laughed a little. You mean, in case someone moves them? He didn't smile. Just write it down, he said. That was weird, but I didn't ask questions. The pay was good, and I needed the job. The first night was boring. The warehouse was huge with rows and rows of mannequins. Some were missing arms or legs. Some were wrapped in plastic, and all of them had the same blank, lifeless faces. The air smelled like dust and plastic. It was so quiet that my footsteps sounded way too loud. Around 3 a.m., I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I stopped walking. The sound was soft, coming from the far end of the warehouse. Probably just the old building creaking, I told myself. But then it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. It was closer this time. I slowly moved my flashlight around. The mannequins stood in their places, just like before. But something felt wrong. I shook off the feeling and turned back toward my desk. That's when I tripped over something. I looked down and froze. A mannequin hand. It lay on the floor, fingers curled slightly, like it had just been reaching for something. I quickly shined my flashlight at the nearest mannequins. None of them were missing a hand. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my logbook and wrote, "Found mannequin, hand on floor, aisle 4. Maybe broken." Then I closed the book and started walking back to my desk. But as I moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. I glanced behind me. Had the mannequins moved? I stood there for a moment, gripping my flashlight a little tighter. My heart was beating faster than before, but I told myself I was just tired. My mind was playing tricks on me. That had to be it. Still, I took another step back, slowly scanning the mannequins with my light. They stood there, lifeless and still, just like before. But something felt off. It wasn't something I could see, more like something I could feel. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the warehouse was holding its breath. I shook my head and forced myself to turn around. "It's just a warehouse," I muttered under my breath. "Just a bunch of plastic dolls." I made it back to my desk, sat down and let out a slow breath. I kept my flashlight close just in case. The cameras in front of me showed the usual empty aisles. Nothing moving, nothing strange, but I still felt uneasy. I glanced at the logbook, at the note I had just written. My own handwriting looked shaky. I wasn't scared, I told myself. I was just on edge. First nights at a new job were always weird. Then, just as I was starting to relax, tap, tap, tap. The sound was back. But this time, it wasn't far away. It was right behind me. My whole body locked up. I could feel something standing there, just inches away. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and for a second I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I had to turn around. I had to look. Swallowing hard, I gripped my flashlight and spun around in my chair. Nothing. Just the empty aisle stretching into darkness. Rows of mannequins standing exactly where they had been before. But my chair had been pushed, just a little, just enough to feel it. I slowly stood up, my breathing shaky. My eyes darted from one mannequin to the next. None of them had moved. None of them should have moved, but I knew something was wrong. And then I saw it. One of the mannequins, the one closest to my desk, had its head turned. It had been facing straight ahead before. I was sure of it, but now it was looking right at me. I couldn't move. My hands gripped the edge of the desk. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the mannequin, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention before. Maybe it was always like that. But no, I remembered walking past it earlier. It had been facing forward, just like the rest. And now, it was looking straight at me. The plastic face had no eyes, no expression, but somehow that made it worse. The smooth, blank stare was unnerving, like it was waiting for me to do something. My fingers fumbled for my flashlight. I clicked it on and aimed it straight at the mannequin's face. Nothing happened. It didn't move. It didn't twitch. It was just a mannequin. Right? I forced myself to take a breath. It's fine, I whispered to myself. I'm just freaking out over nothing. To prove it, I reached out. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of its shoulder. Solid. Lifeless. Just a stupid mannequin. I let out a shaky laugh, shaking my head. See? Nothing to be scared of. And then, something moved. Not the mannequin in front of me. Something behind it. A soft rustling sound, like fabric shifting. I whipped my flashlight past the mannequin, deeper into the aisle. My heart pounded. My light swept over row after row of silent figures, their plastic bodies frozen in strange, lifelike poses. Nothing. I was alone. Right? I swallowed hard, stepping back toward my desk. The chair creaked as I sat down, my hands clammy against the armrests. I didn't take my eyes off that mannequin. Not for a second. And then, the worst thing happened. The cameras in front of me, those old grainy monitors, started to flicker. The static buzzed softly, distorting the picture. One by one, the screens blinked out. Aisle 1, gone. Aisle 2, gone. Aisle 3, static. And then aisle 4, the one right behind me. Before the screen cut out completely, I saw it. A mannequin. Stepping forward, and then blackness. The camera were dead, and I was alone in the dark. My breath hitched. The cameras were down. Every single screen in front of me had gone dark, leaving only a low, humming static. I swallowed hard, gripping my flashlight like it was the only thing keeping me safe. I wasn't imagining it. I saw it. A mannequin had moved. I forced myself to turn, my flashlight cutting through the darkness behind me. The rows of mannequins stood still, their plastic faces frozen, their stiff limbs locked in place. But I knew. One of them wasn't where it used to be. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. The silence was unbearable. I felt like I was waiting for something to happen, some hint that I wasn't losing my mind. And then I heard it, a soft dragging sound. Not footsteps, something scraping against the concrete floor. It came from deep in the warehouse. I couldn't just sit there. I had to check. That was my job. Every step I took felt too loud, like I was disturbing something that wanted me to be quiet. My flashlight beam trembled as I walked past the rows of mannequins, their featureless faces staring ahead, their plastic fingers forever curled in unnatural poses. I made it to aisle 4. I knew it right away, because one of the mannequins was different. It was closer. Before, they had all been standing on their display bases, neatly lined up. But this one, it was on the floor, standing there, in the middle of the aisle, like it had stepped off its platform. I felt sick. My skin crawled. I wanted to run, to leave, to pretend I never saw it, but I had to be sure. Slowly, I stepped closer, my flashlight flickering slightly. The mannequin was just like the others. Smooth plastic, no expression, stiff limbs. But something about it felt wrong. My heart pounded as I bent down, shining my light near its feet. The bases they stood on were supposed to be bolted to them. This one had been ripped off. The metal rod that normally held it up was bent, snapped. Something had moved it. I reached out, just a little, ready to tap it. Maybe it would tip over. Maybe I'd wake up from whatever this nightmare was. But before my fingers could touch it, the lights went out. Not just my flashlight, the whole warehouse. I was plunged into complete darkness, and that's when I heard it. Right next to me, a whisper, not words, just breathing. Slow, heavy, not mine. Something was standing right there. I couldn't breathe. The darkness was thick, pressing in on me like a heavy blanket. My ears strained, trying to pick up anything, any sound, any movement. But the only thing I heard was the slow, deliberate breathing, right next to me. I squeezed my flashlight, my fingers fumbling for the switch. I clicked it frantically, but nothing happened. The battery was fine a second ago. Why wasn't it working now? The breathing grew closer. I could feel it now, a presence, standing inches away. My whole body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. I felt it, cold, smooth plastic pressing against my shirt. I spun around and stumbled back, sucking in a sharp breath. My flashlight flickered back to life for a split second, and I saw it. The mannequin was closer. Too close. Its face was still blank, still expressionless. But its hand was outstretched, reaching for me. I staggered backward, my breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. My flashlight flickered again, just long enough to catch something even worse. More mannequins. They had moved. Rows and rows of them, no longer lined up neatly. Some were standing in the aisles. Others had shifted slightly, just enough to be noticeable. They were surrounding me. My stomach twisted. This wasn't possible. I was the only person here. The cameras were off. The doors were locked. No one could have moved them. Unless... No, I wasn't going to finish that thought. I forced myself to move, pushing past the nearest mannequin, shoving it aside. It toppled over with a hollow plastic thud. I didn't care. I needed to get back to the front desk, to the exit, to anywhere but here. My feet pounded against the concrete floor as I sprinted toward the main hall. I wasn't even sure if I was going the right way anymore. Everything looked wrong. The shelves and rows of mannequins blurred together in the flickering light, twisting and stretching in ways that didn't make sense. And then, just as I thought I was free, I ran straight into something. I hit the floor hard, my flashlight clattering away. My shoulder ached, my head spinning from the impact. I groaned and looked up. A mannequin, right in front of me. But this one, it was crawling. Its stiff, plastic fingers dragged against the floor, pulling itself toward me in jerky, unnatural movements. And then, for the first time, I heard something I will never forget. A crackling, broken voice. Not human. Not right. It came from the mannequin. Stay with us. The lights snapped back on. Every mannequin was back in its place. Every single one, standing perfectly still, like they had never moved at all. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The words still echoed in my head. Stay with us. That wasn't possible. Mannequins don't talk. They don't move. They don't crawl toward people in the dark. And yet, I had seen it. I had heard it. I forced myself to breathe, my chest rising and falling in a short, panicked gasps. My flashlight lay a few feet away, still flickering weakly. My body screamed at me to grab it, to get up, to run. But I was too afraid to take my eyes off the mannequins. They were back in their places, standing perfectly still, lined up like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew. The one that had been reaching for me before, it was back in line. But now its head was turned just slightly, just enough to be looking right at me. My fingers curled into the cold concrete beneath me. I had to get out of here. I wasn't staying another second in this place. I reached for my flashlight, my hands shaking. As soon as my fingers wrapped around it, I heard it again. A whisper, not words this time, just laughter, software hollow, coming from everywhere at once. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The mannequins didn't move, but the air felt different, thicker, charged with something wrong. And then, bang! A loud crash from behind me. I spun around, shining my light wildly. One of the mannequins had fallen. Number not fallen. It had been thrown. It lay sprawled in the aisle, its arm twisted at an unnatural angle, its head turned completely backward. That was it. I was done. I took off running, sprinting through the aisles, my shoes slamming against the concrete. The warehouse was too big, the rows of mannequins never ending. Every direction looked the same, every turn leading me deeper into this nightmare. And then I saw it, the main hallway, the entrance, the way out. I pushed harder, lungs burning, my only focus on the exit door. It was just ahead, just a few more steps and I'd be free. I reached for the handle, and it wouldn't move. I yanked harder, locked. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers shaking so bad I could barely hold them. I jammed the key into the lock, twisting desperately. Behind me, the mannequin shifted. I didn't see it, but I felt it. A presence, getting closer, breathing, right behind me. I turned the key. The lock clicked. I shoved the door open, throwing myself outside, slamming it shut behind me. Cold night air hit my face. I stumbled back, gasping, my hand still gripping the handle. The warehouse was silent. Nothing followed me. No movement, no whispers, just stillness. I backed away slowly, my body trembling. Through the small glass window on the door, I could just barely see inside. The mannequins stood where they had always been, lifeless, motionless, normal. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something. The mannequin closest to the door, the one right up against the glass, its hand was pressed against it, and its head was tilted just slightly like it was watching me go. I never went back.